As you guys are learning these different commandments each week, that you're going to see that they're not there to bind you or to trap you or to burden you or to condemn you. They're actually there to set you free. And it really shows what binds your hearts and helps discern the sins that hold you down in order for us to really be able to cling on to the gospel. It's not a road or a path to condemnation, but a path to freedom, to saying the gospel and the beauty of Jesus Christ. There's a story about a prison that I heard in a seminar by Ravi Zacharias, and I shared this in a past sermon in the past, but it's so good. I mean, he often talks about a prison called Angola in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and it used to be called one of the most dangerous prisons in America. And at the time when the story was said, this was a little bit under a decade ago, there were about 5,300 prisoners. About 87% of them were in their life without parole, 45 on death row. And it was said to be the bloodiest prison in America, where, even as they go in, they're like, yo, we should give them knives so they can protect themselves to survive. But the speaker was sharing how this prison had become one of the safest prisons due to so many chaplains and missionaries that had come out to reach out to this group. They put Bibles in every cell. They held Bible studies. They had chapel services. Scripture was written all over the walls. And this pastor, as he was visiting and preaching to them, he came up to one young man and asked, "Hey, can I ask you a question? Are you one of those that are in here who are in here for life without parole?" And the young man was like, "Yes, you're right." And he went up and said, "So you're so young. How does that make you feel?" And this guy responds by saying this. He said, "If you knew the man I was, the chains that were binding me inside, if it took prison for me to come out to find true freedom, then I am just happy to be here. I have found life in here that my soul had never had out there. If you want to pray, please pray for my parents who think they are free but are actually in bondage." And it makes you wonder, what is real freedom? God's words, God's promises, His truth, His laws are designed to point you to true freedom, to reveal what truly binds you. And it frees us in such a way that you can be tied down in a prison cell, locked away, but your hearts can sing amazing grace. And this is what the Ten Commandments does for us. These are words of a loving father talking to their children to free them and to really, really help them to live their best. Let's turn to our text this morning called Exodus chapter 20, 1 through 2, and also 7. Today we're going through our third commandment called respect the name. And let me read the word to you guys this morning. "And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." Then jumping into verse 7, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's pray. Dear God, I just pray that you may open up our ears and our hearts to be able to receive your words. And Lord, I just pray that it may be able to plant deep seeds that will sprout fruit in our lives. And Lord, as we learn more and more about your commandments, oh Lord, I pray that we may be able to see the beauty of your gospel. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be holy and pleasing to you. I pray that your gospel may be preached and your spirit may work in our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I often heard it said that if you really want to learn another language, the first place you got to start is by learning the curse words in that language. They say, through that you learn the culture, you learn, that's how you become a native speaker. And it's funny because although Korean was probably my first language growing up, it's spoken in the home. Like most second generation immigrant kids, like I forgot it all by the end of, elementary. And I actually relearned it in high school. And this is because a few of my upperclassmen that I got like really close with, they were better in Korean. They always spoke Korean, so I kind of wanted to learn. But you got to think, if you learn Korean from this, testosterone bubbling teenagers, you learn a lot of cursing. But the thing was, when I was learning these curse words, I thought it was normal vocabulary. So I'll learn it. I'll come home and I'll talk to my mom using a bunch of curse words. And I don't know if she remembers it, but and I thought, in the language, I thought that would make her proud. She was probably looking at me saying, "Oh my gosh, I immigrated all the way to America for a better life and a brighter education, only for my son to curse at me in Korean after coming from an American school." But that was the start of me getting to the habit of actually cursing. I mean, it didn't help that I liked a lot of music that had a lot of, profanity. So, it was a natural thing. I just kind of spoke it. at the peak of my high school time, like I almost did it in every sentence. And just coming out naturally. So it's quite a journey for me to change the way I talk. I remember I began to replace a few words when I'm in this journey, to more neutral words, like the S word turned into shoot, or the F word turned into F, or like frick or something like that. Or on the religious side, Jesus would turn into G's and God would turn into gosh. But I almost said gosh again. Habits die hard. They really do. At the heat of the moment, they all come out. And some of you guys might start thinking, all right, what does this have to do with the third commandment? I mean, what does this have to do with faith or God or religion? What does it have to do with taking the Lord's name in vain? I mean, it's just words. Well, it's interesting when looking into how we actually describe those category of words. I don't know how I missed this up to this point. Why do we call them curse words? Curse or swear words? What are we swearing on? What are we actually doing? And in my research, I realized that the description of category of words have a lot of history. It was actually customary, really throughout human history, to swear by the name of God or by a name of any God, really, to hold more weight in what you were saying. See, in a more secular culture, we kind of miss that. We're like, we say whatever we want, but for the longest time, when you curse, you were invoking a greater power. See, to swear by a name gave those words a weight of authority. It's kind of like if I'm ever talking about medical things, I'm going to be like, this Dr. So-and-so said this, or Dr. So-and-so agree with me. In the same way, we're kind of borrowing legitimacy from a greater power. Cursing often worked in the same way. The emphasis that you are giving to a situation, or an offensive word that you throw out on somebody, or a label or pseudo naming of some sort, was done by invoking power from a deity to empower those words. Same concept with bless, right? Curse and bless. The opposite. It's the same concept, but with the opposite intention. We bless by invoking power from a higher authority. And this is where some people often, equate foul language with the third commandment. You shall not take the Lord your God's name in vain. But it's not that general, It's not like God is being like, all right, so you guys got to wash your mouth out with soap now. It's not getting at that, We can't take it too broadly, because the third commandment doesn't simply say nice things. Because if you guys ever read through the Bible, it says a lot of harsh and offensive things. But the thing is, certain things should be cursed and certain things should be blessed. But more than that, this commandment is concerned about the misuse of a name that is being invoked, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously. See, this commandment is basically saying, respect the name of God. Respect his authority. Respect the power that you are speaking to. Don't take it lightly. Don't reference God in a way where it's just empty words. Don't reference God when you have no authority to see. See, vain means empty, right? It's saying don't use my name in an empty way, or don't use it with an authority that you don't have in empty ways. See, today's sermon really is a follow-up to last week's sermon. See, both have the concept of how we worship and recognize God. See, last week we talked about how we shouldn't make images of God based upon our imaginations. God is God, so we shouldn't project the characteristics or things that we want on him. We can't forget that images of God often don't live in a vacuum. Our imaginations of God have serious influence over our lives. It affects how we live. It affects how we treat others. Therefore, images are not left to us to decide. But today, it hits us from a kind of a different angle. Not only are we not called to imagine God in the way we want, we're also called not to reference him in the way that we want. For the longest time, I thought that this commandment was just a throwaway commandment, It's not that serious. I mean, who really does it? I mean, is this so bad to be like OMG? I say OMG all the time. Or I use God as an adjective just to, make my words a little bit stronger. But the more I researched and meditated on this commandment, I realized why God would put it in the 10 Commandments and why it was actually so serious. But just think about it, right? Just think about it. I think we all get this concept, whether we're religious or not. Think about it. If you apply that to yourself, don't we not preserve our own names, but for good reason? It's amazing these days how much junk phone calls I get. I get them all the time. I'm so happy that, I don't know if it's my Apple, iPhone, or it's T-Mobile, but it tells me scam likely. So I usually don't pick up the phone when, I get random calls. But once in a while I do, just so I can tell them to take me off the calling list. But every once in a while, they'll be like, Paul, you won a prize to something. I just need some information, or somebody hacked into your account. Therefore, give me your account number. I'm just like, and people ask for a lot of things. They ask for your address. They ask for your social number. They ask for your usernames, passwords, and whatever. To do what? To do whatever they want with it. They take it. They misrepresent you. They kill your credit. They represent you in false ways that hurts. Or have you guys ever had that annoying friend that ever took your smartphone and went onto your Facebook or your Instagram and made a post that you didn't agree with? I did that to a friend before. Like, I actually take credit for it. I'm like, that's why you're married right now. But I told a girl, like, yo, I like you, and did it for him. And he was so mad at me. Now he thanks me, I think. But, usually when that happens, it's not a big deal if it's like, something light. But if someone misrepresents you, you can get fired, or some worse things can happen. We understand the damage that can happen to us if someone messes with our name or our profile that represents us. People who don't have ownership of it, people who don't have the authority to wield it. This is why we're so serious when it comes to the identification that points to us. It's super important because they're not just labels. There are very identity connected to a lot of the privileges we have, the degrees or accomplishments we have, or even our bank account, how much money we have. But you got to think, how much more would it be when God's name is invoked or added or put together with things that he never authorized? Imagine the repercussions that could have. There is tremendous danger when God's name is misrepresented. I mean, even the way that God gives this commandment is different than the other two. Here he refers to himself in third person, kind of more indirectly. And, rather than saying, hey, you shall not misuse my name, he actually goes on to make it a little bit more specific. He says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. He actually goes out of his name to call upon his covenant name that he's given, which is really kind of a non-name, so it's kind of weird. He references, if you actually look in the Bible, it's probably like Lord in capital letters, which is actually referring to, Yahweh, I am who I am, which, those words are really just the consonants of the Hebrew letters for that word because people don't want to say the name of God. It's a name that God gives to Moses when Moses asks, who should I say that sent me? He says, say, I am sent me. And it's kind of confusing. But that phrase, that name represents so much more than we actually think. See, God's name in and of itself is dared not to be spoken with, because in that name or that non-name, God is saying, I have my own self-existence. I have self-sufficiency. I am sovereign. I'm the authority that all others reference to. I am that alone. What does this mean? It means that no one has the authority over that name. No one is to use it in vain ways. See, usually as humans, whenever we want some type of credibility, we'll reference a higher authority. I spent a long time writing papers in the academic world, and to be taken seriously for anything, you have to keep referencing higher authorities. But God is saying, no, I am the authority. It starts with me. And in this commandment, he's basically saying, I copyrighted, I trademarked, I patent, and I'm branding my name. It's not public property anymore. Don't put my logo on things. Don't imitate it in wrong ways. Don't stamp my name on anything. And you better be using it the right way. And I was like, wow, I never thought of it that way, but you start to apply that concept into so many ways that we actually use God's name or has been used in the past, and you really see the dangers of it. When I was researching these categories, it's really a lot. I mean, a lot of different scholars, some had like 15 categories, others had they had so many. I was like, all right, I'm just going to boil a few down and put them together because, I think we can apply it once we get the concept. But one of the ways that God's name is misused or used in vain is when people use it for selfish gain. I got to admit, I've done this before. I use God's name to get me out in trouble. When I was younger, I guess I still speed a lot, but I sped more when I was younger. And one pastor once told me, he was like, yo, when you get pulled over, just be like, yo, I'm a pastor, and something like that. And then I got let go before. And I kid you not, I got pulled over once, and that's running through my head. Like, what should I do? How do I do it subtly? Do I give him my seminary ID instead of my license? Like, how should I do this? So, I got pulled over and I'm just like, in my head, I got to use a pastor card. I mean, doctors say they got emergency, it's a spiritual emergency. So I got pulled over. I put on my holy face and I was like, oh, officer, I'm a local youth pastor. And, I'm like, I'm in a rush to do some ministry things. It won't happen again. I really wanted to know that I'm a good guy and I'm doing the work of God. And hopefully he's a Christian. He'll have a sympathetic heart. It turns out he let me go. I mean, it seems pretty innocent, right? But there's so many ways that can be abused. Sometimes God's name is used in vain to give someone authority, give oneself credibility in the eyes of others. In fact, my family's been scammed by a guy who called himself a pastor and persuaded us to do business dealings, only to later find out he was a fraud. Some people wear their faith on their sleeves just so they can get credibility. Do business at church. How can you reject a church member? This happens at multiple levels, though. Not just in personal cases, also in politics, even in the church. You watch the politics and you watch people, going out to debates. Like, well, why is God's name used so much? Like, God bless this, and and you're like, man, I don't even know if they really believe in. It's used for credibility, both on the left and the right. I mean, they always use God's name, and politicians are horrible representatives of God many times. This also happens in church. When I was going over this, man, I was like, man, this is like the commandment against pastors or anybody that preaches or anybody that represents God. They're like, man, like the amount of humility you need when you are preaching God's word. And a lot has been done under God's name that it's really done for personal gain, simply to get credibility, whether they do it consciously or not. This too is taking God's name in vain. And I thought about this. A pastor's credibility is not in their title or how many times they reference God's name, but their credibility is how much they fear that name or submitted to that person's word. And this is where it's getting at, like not taking the Lord's name in vain. The second place where you see God's name misused often or taken in vain is when we put words into God's mouth. Just a few months ago, one of our staff at our church got an email, apparently from me, to buy some gift cards and send it to some random place, I think. And she texts me and she's like, yo, what's up? What's going on? And I'm just like, why are you texting me? What's going on? Like, hey, I'm doing good. How about you? And, we're like tiptoeing around, and suddenly she just calls me. She's like, yo, like, you just sent me that email. What's up? I was like, what email? And she's like, didn't you just tell me to buy some gift cards and send it somewhere? I was like, no, I didn't do that. And then she looks at the email, and like the email is pretty similar. My name's kind of on there, and just a little bit tweaking the numbers and stuff like that. I was like, yo, people are so good. Like, wow, she was about to send it, buy it and send it. It's a funny example, but this happens often. I am extremely wary of people who often use the phrase that they're speaking on behalf of God, or they use the phrase, God told me to tell you, or that God told me this. You don't know how many times, I can actually count a few of people that have testimonies like, oh yeah, God is telling me to marry this person. And I'm just like, don't get me wrong, some actually work, some of them actually get married, but sometimes I can see a mile away, like, yo, God ain't telling you that, man. Like, that's not spiritual guesses, man. You got to be logical. She's out of your league. She's Louis Vuitton. Go back to Marshall's, man. Go shop there, just playing around. But this too is taking God's name in vain, putting words into his mouth that he never spoke. And there's such great danger in this, and people have been led astray so much by this, hurt by this, because promises were given under the name of God that was never authorized. When I was young, a spiritual woman came to me. My father was really sick when I was younger, handicapped for a while, and she said she had a vision from God, and that my dad would be walking like next year, but the next year he actually passed away. I struggle so much with that internally. And it's not that God doesn't lead us. He certainly does. I've been led in very specific ways by what I felt God was leading me to. But there's a big difference between walking with faith and trust and trying to discern the heart of God versus putting words into God's mouth because of the desires that we want. See, faith in God is not simply feelings or a validation of what we desire. It's more solid than that. I mean, God can use our feelings and emotions to guide us, certainly. But history has shown us that Satan uses it far more often to lead us astray. Those feelings have to be guided guided by a higher authority, God's word, God's will, his calling upon us. This is the reason why at the end of the Bible, you guys can open it up. In Revelation, it says, no one should take or add or take away from this word. It's a very serious thing. And let's be honest, putting words into God's mouth has led to so many evils in our world. So much evil has been done under the banner of God's name. Every time an atheist or someone comes up to me and say, so much evil has been done under the name of God. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. No matter how sincere they might be, if you put words into the mouth of God, following new prophecies or new prophets, so much evil can be done under that banner. And God takes this really seriously. This commandment comes with a consequence. It says, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. How is God being represented? The third way, I think, might be more applicable to us. We often misuse God's name when we simply take that name lightly. And I thought about this for a while because I do it all the time. I know it's true of me. I say, gosh, and when something bad happens, like a car cuts me off, I'm like, God, and it's like, why did I just say that, And you got to wonder, it's like that respect of the name. Do we fear it? Do we respect it enough not to make it an adjective or a talking point or a euphemism or a joke? It's so funny. My 2-year-old daughter, her name is Joy. And as you can imagine, Joy is one of those names that you can play around with a lot. And she's 2 years old. I don't even think she understands what I'm saying. But sometimes I'm like, joy to the world. And I'm like in her face, like, I got the joy, thinking she'll like it. And she'll look up at me and she'll be like, stop. I'm like, yo, you're 2 years old telling me to stop. She's like, stop, no joy. I was like, it's like, stop saying my name like that. But she doesn't say it. She doesn't react that way when I'm just calling her or just referring to her name. There's something really very spiritual and powerful about names. So much that we'll do anything to preserve it, to protect it. We emotionally respond to it because we know it's more than simply a label. It represents who we are. A while back, I read a book called How to Make Friends and Influence People. And don't judge me. Don't be like, all right, Pastor Paul, there's better ways to learn how to make friends than reading a book. But before you judge me, when your social skills suck, you got to do it some way, Some of you guys might need to read that book. But anyways, it's a classic book written by a guy named Dale Carnegie, and it's one of the top recommended books in the business world and those who seek to be influential. Anyways, I was reading this book, and he said this one key phrase. He says, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. And he's going on to say, simply remembering someone's name opens up their heart. And once that heart is open, whatever you tag along with it can be a huge influence. It can either swing it open even more, as he's talking about complimenting it and stuff like that, or it can close it. And you think, how much more is it important to be careful if even we as humans are like, we take our name, how much more is God's name that's serious? A name above all names, a God who is personal. He doesn't want us to take his name lightly. He doesn't want you to say when we step on a piece of Lego or stub your toe on a curb, or a word we simply say to show our emotions. No. He's saying, no, but take my name seriously. Take it seriously. See, the thing about God is he not only hears what we say, but he knows how our hearts are going. And all week I was looking at this commandment, I kept asking God, all right, I see the prohibitions, I see the dangers in it. But what are you actually telling us to do? And I realized this commandment is actually really simple. If one way is to take the Lord's name in vain, what's the opposite? I realized it's worship. It's so obvious, right? But it wasn't to me. I was so caught up in things that we shouldn't be doing, like, don't misrepresent God, don't put words in his mouth. Paul, you'd be better pastor. And I'm just like meditating on all this. But then it just swings around and says, this commandment is saying, don't take the Lord's name in vain, but instead worship it, praise it. Worship is the opposite of vanity. Worshiping a name is opposite to using it in vain. See, to be vain means to be empty, but to worship means to give it its full worth, to see its worthship in it. See, all of the Bible is talking about this concept over and over again. Praise and glorify God's name. Lift it up. Shout to the Lord, all the earth. Sometimes when you're saying this, you're like, of course, this is what the bottom line will be. At first I was like, oh, I don't see where freedom is in that. Okay, worship, so close my eyes and sing songs. What does worship mean? Why is there freedom in giving full weight to God's name? Why is there freedom in fearing God's name in this way? How is that freedom? Until I realized this, guys, you can only really have freedom when you give worth to God's name and when you fear it and when you take it seriously. Why? Because when you fear God's name and you take that seriously, you really fear him, you really respect him, you really worship him, you don't fear anything else. You don't fear man, you don't fear things, you don't fear circumstances. You fear the only name that truly has a worthiness to be feared of. And you have freedom in understanding that worth and power of your God. It's the same thing, right? It's the freedom and confidence that a child has when they know the strength of their father or the love of their mother. That fear that they have, they know it, they respect it. We often think, right? A child has more freedom when their parents are hands off, when there's no parental authority, when you just let them do whatever they want. Oh, how blind that comment is. I don't think any orphan will boast in their freedom. No orphan boasts in their freedom, but they yearn for someone to place their name on them. They yearn that because they know that's what true freedom is. A child is truly free when they understand the strong foundation of strength and love of the people that love them. And this is why it's so utterly important that God's name is not taken in vain, but must be held up high and worshiped. Why? Because it is only in his name that our names are redeemed. Only in his name where we go from spiritual orphans to sons and daughters of God. Guys, this is the good news that God seeks to place a new name upon us. See, there's a pattern in the Bible. God has a tendency to rename people. Abram becomes Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah. Jacob becomes Israel. Simon becomes Peter. Saul becomes Paul. When you look at those names, man, they're like in different situations. I mean, Abram and Sarai, they have no kids for like 100 years. And back then, that basically means you have no future, no legacy. But God renames them. Abraham means father of multitudes. Sarah means mother of nations. You see a guy named Jacob. He's actually a trickster. He tricked his brother into selling his birthright, and he stole the blessings of his father. In fact, there are so many family issues, he didn't talk to his brother in decades. Jacob's name actually means to grab the heel of his brother or to supplant or to pull your way up. His name is changed to Israel, meaning having power with God. When you see all these patterns, right? Saul, the killer of Christians, turned into master church planner Paul. See, God has taken a lot of bad names, bad labels, and turned it upside down and covered it with a new name. Now, a lot of us, we walk around with different names. What labels hold you captive? We all have them. What names are crushing you? Sometimes we have names of our failures, names that hurt, names that debilitate, names that have come from false rumors. I know of people who move from town to town or city to city or state to state to simply run away from a name that represents them. I have past names. In fact, I had someone who he didn't come up to me, but he said to someone else, I would never go to that church because I know what that name represented before. We work on our names. We do so much attack letters onto it. I studied for years to put a few letters on it. It doesn't change much. We build a name for ourselves, or we work to hide our shame of our names. We work so hard to build a name only to realize it's just vanity. Why? Because there's only one name that's actually worth anything. And sometimes, we understand this idea of vanity, so we try to cover it up. Guys, only God can give us a name that actually matters. Only God can give you a name that can cover up any of the stained names that you have in the past. Covers up your insecurities that we're always trying to cover up, the hurts, the pains, the pride, the fakeness, the sins. And God is saying, don't take my name in vain. Why? Because not only do I possess the worthiness that crushes vanity, I'll have a name I'm willing to bestow upon you that will crush any of your own vanity and give you real worth. I have the name that I'm willing to bestow upon you that will crush any vanity and give you real worth. And guys, this is what the gospel is it not? Christ covering us with his name. Revelation 2:17, when John is writing to the churches, he says this: he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, and I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone with a new name written on the stone that no one knows except the one who receives it. And it goes on to Philippians 2:9-11 says this: therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Gosh. God doesn't simply call us not to take his name in vain. He knows, one, it's the best for us, and he knows that he is worthy of it, and he knows that it gives us freedom that we. How do we receive that name? Simple. Or maybe not so simple. Placing your faith in the name of Christ, the one who is the perfect representation in the image of God, who through his death on the cross killed our shame, nailed it to the cross, all of our sins, all of our hurts, all of our past, and gives us a new name, places his righteousness, his worth, his identity onto us so that we may become sons and daughters of God. And that's the name that we can truly thrive in. Therefore, we praise his name. Amen? Let's pray.